So Vancouver, fifth trip here. Can
Yeah.
you just talk about how the event is doing so far as ticket sales and relative to your expectations?
Yeah, I mean we've been really thrilled. Right out of the gates, ticket sales started going hard. We have continued to open up sections over the last few weeks, which should imply we're sort of trending towards a sellout. I think we're down to only $75 and $85 tickets left. So if you want to get in the building, everything on the floor and lower bowl is sold. In a certain sense, we're not surprised, right? Like this is a fight that, I remember when it was announced, it seemed like, every account, everyone who has any association with mixed martial arts was like, man, we got to see this fight. So nice to bring it to Vancouver. It's always great to have these type of events to not necessarily re-engage a city, but just provide something that's amazing, right? Vancouver's been on our map for a long, long time, since 115. I mean, Chuck Franklin, and then we went on sale with Lesnar, and Carwin ended up being JDS and Carwin. We've had a long history of really solid events here in Vancouver, and so we're excited to deliver this one.
You talk about re-engaging the market. Montreal is a market that probably needs to be re-engaged. Is that something that is on your radar?
Yeah, I mean Montreal's on the radar every single year. It's really tough. It may sound like a bit of a broken record, but in Canada, especially with the NBA and the NHL, it's hard to find weekends during our season or during the year that makes sense for us. Love to get back to Montreal, absolutely, and it's got nothing to do with the scuttlebutt recently of Khabib and GSP. This is us every year trying to get back at the right time of year to be in Montreal. Summer's tough across Canada. I mean, we work extra hard to make sure we're getting the awareness out on events, that we're promoting and selling the tickets for all the summer events, because everyone goes on holidays. I mean, that's sort of how it works. But we've got a real treat this weekend, and we're really excited about it.
I was going to ask. It sounds like this year you guys might break your ticket sale total for like a calendar year. And events like this, not a title fight and anything, and then you look at New York, having a title fight there. What does that say about like the state of the sport, that you can sell out venues with these type of fights that aren't championship bouts? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's something that we've been invested in and supportive of for a long time. You guys know how it works, right? You go through different stages, and all of a sudden, like Masvidal has percolated up to the top, justifiably so, and for good reason. And it's that fight that if you asked Masvidal what he wanted, prior to his last two fights, guarantee he wouldn't have said Diaz. And so all of a sudden, this has come together at the right time. Dana and Hunter and Sean and Mick were able to pull that thing together, and it's great timing because you want that type of event for somewhere as special as the Garden.
You talked about Montreal. What about Toronto? It seems with the trend, it's you skip 1 year and then come back the next year. Do you think you'll be back in Toronto next year? Yeah,
we're aiming to. I mean, we'd love to be. The cadence thus far in the last, say, 6 or 7 years has been once every 2 years. Which you think is appropriate. I mean, we want to make sure that we're getting to as many places across the country here as we can. So you looked at 2020, and maybe we're back in the Maritimes or Atlantic Canada. We haven't been to, we were in Winnipeg last year, I think, in December. 2017. Yeah. So, getting back to sort of central Canada, whether it's Saskatchewan or Manitoba, we're not sure yet, but we want to make sure we are, delivering quality events across the country, and we're going to continue to have 3 total events in Canada. And so that definitely limits us, but it gives us an opportunity to come back with, a market that's thirsting for it.
Is Victoria ever been considered as a fight market?
Sorry, Victoria?
Yeah, Victoria, just because it is a pretty big fight community. There's a couple notable gyms out there. Rise FC just had their show there.
Yeah.
Is that something you guys have looked at maybe for like a fight night card?
And that's where Tristan Connolly came from, right?
Well, we're from there, and he fought there last July. Yeah. I mean, on the radar. I mean, we've got to be smart about these types of things. I think we need to have the proper venue. Yeah. Right, because we want to be, if you're in Canada, you got to be in a solid hockey rink that can go 10, 12, 14, or 16,000 or more people. And you've also got a number of cities that are close to Victoria that, can host these events. So I think for us, we've kind of pinpointed certain places across the country that we know we can draw from the surrounding areas, and quite frankly, that's why we're here in Vancouver.
Do you have any new markets that are on the radar that you're considering?
Yeah, a few. Probably a bit premature to talk about those publicly. We've tested
out in Canada, since I guess we started in 2008 with events in Canada, a variety of different cities, and most have worked. Most, if not all, have worked. I think now we're probably at the point where we're getting back to cities that, we know we can work well with, that can draw from surrounding areas. There definitely are sort of 3 or 4 other cities we're considering, but nothing that we can share publicly yet.
As the international side of things grows with more shows in China, more shows in Russia, I know you said 3 is still the plan for Canada. Is the intent to stay with the same number of shows overall, or is there a possibility the shows per year grow?
No, we will generally stay with the same number of shows overall. We're going to head into 2020 with 42 events on the schedule, with 12 pay-per-views on the schedule. So the distribution will be pretty similar to what it is right now. I don't see anything changing. It may kind of vacillate, up or down one event, but I think for the time being, 40 to 42 is the number we're going with.
David, at Ottawa, you mentioned that you wanted to make this Vancouver event happen. How quickly did that all come together after Ottawa, or was it already in motion?
Well, we had Vancouver on the radar. I'm not sure at what point last spring we had sort of confirmed and booked the venue, but we had been in discussions with Rogers Arena for some time. As kind of the fights progress over the course of the year, you get greater clarity on what type of event you can bring to the city. We're always trying to pinpoint which athletes are going to work well for that city, and that's I know an obvious statement, but we're trying to balance who's available and who would make sense for that market based on culture and language and history and all those types of things. So I wouldn't say Vancouver came together quickly. We'd been planning to come here for a while. It's just nice that post Ottawa, post Chicago, now all of a sudden you've got Cowboy available and he can come in and do the dance with Gaethje.
Speaking of athletes working well, last time Max Holloway fought up in Canada, we were kind of asking him, did he think he was the biggest Canadian star now, even though he's not from Canada? As far as who is kind of the most popular fighter up here? Is it him? Is it Cowboy? He came up in Ottawa again. Valentina Shevchenko's fought here a couple of times. By whatever metrics you guys use, who's driving?
Yeah, I think the best place to look, I think the best place to start is looking how the pay-per-views do overall, or the general sort of magnitude of the event. You can take certain athletes that we've got, like John Jones, like Connor, like Holloway, and wherever they go, they do well. And so it's nice that he's embraced the sort of Canadiana element of it. There's connection points with him and our country for many years. I think that there's a situation where we're trying to bring athletes that we know will have a long runway in Canada and resonate well with the population here. But when it comes down to it, it almost doesn't matter. People just want to see a highly competitive event. If we've got a mismatch, we've got a fight that just doesn't make sense, our fans realize that, right? Like our fans are, scrutinizing and intelligent and really discerning when it comes to the authenticity of our events. And that's why it almost doesn't matter. You just got to have a good matchup. And so we're pretty lucky these days in the way that some of the athletes are progressing through the ranks.
I know you weren't in Abu Dhabi, but that was seemingly a pretty successful event.
Yeah.
What have the conversations been about the future years of that deal? Like what changes are you going to make? Those kind of things?
Well, it's pretty high bar to set, right? Take Khabib to Abu Dhabi. First and foremost, the event was groundbreaking. It really was. We saw a glimpse into what we have always sort of aspired to be this truly global sport that transcends language and culture and religion. And though we've seen glimpses of it, I don't think we've seen it to this level, this magnitude, as we did this past weekend. And I'll give you a good example. I'm not sure if I've talked to any of you guys about this in the last week or so, but looking at some of the free fights and not how they performed, because the numbers were staggering, like in line with UFC 229, which we expected, and we're glad that it actually turned out that way. But it was the distribution, was where people were watching these things. And when you go through kind of the top 10 list of where people are watching a standard free fight, because we release these free fights in advance of every big event, and it's the normal kind of like US, Canada, Australia, UK, et cetera, in the lead up to 242, it was obviously the US, but proportionally it was much smaller. And then it was, India and Indonesia and Malaysia. And so all the Muslim community was coming out to support and watch Khabib. Now, we obviously aren't able and have not transacted those people. If they're in those countries, they're watching either on free to air or they're watching pay TV or maybe some sort of digital service. But this to us was just a clear indication that there are millions and millions of people around the world that love the sport and connect with different athletes. And I think when it leads into next year's event in Abu Dhabi, maybe we have Khabib, maybe not. I'm not sure what the case is going to be, but I think this year really made an impact.
When you say the numbers were in line with UFC 229, do you mean from a pay-per-view standpoint or just overall viewership?
No, I'm talking like my example to Mike was just overall viewership. I mean, we were tracking, a variety of different metrics around the world. And, I brought up the example of the YouTube free fights because they're accessible to everyone and YouTube is virtually everywhere. But, if you're in China and you're on, Weibo or Douyin or, you're on TikTok or you're a variety of different platforms, we were just seeing astronomical numbers that were in line with what we saw with UFC 229.
And just to circle back to what you said earlier, you mentioned the scuttlebutt of GSP and Khabib.
Yeah.
Is that a fight that could potentially happen? And would Montreal be a market where you'd want to bring that if GSP does come back for a one-night only type deal?
How's the Olympic Stadium doing these days?
That's what I was going to say. Is the Olympic Stadium able to...
I don't know. I mean, to your first question, definitely more of a Dana question. I'm not sure what those guys have in store. It's something that has obviously... It's something that's obviously on the radar. I think for a lot of people, it'd be cool if that fight could make sense. But there's a lot of reasons why it doesn't make sense. So I think where we are right now is sort of seeing. I think Khabib was pretty vocal about getting some rest and sitting back and trying to think of the next couple of fights in his career. So really don't have an answer on that other than as a good Canadian, love to see that fight.
Would it also be, if you could see that fight happening, do you think it could happen in Montreal, or is Abu Dhabi that's potentially the place that they try and book that fight?
No, I mean, listen, it could happen in a variety of different places, but one thing's clear is you need a big arena, which Montreal has. If that fight would ever to come together, maybe it's a stadium fight, who knows? But I think we're kind of going down a path of pure sort of hyperbole right now. But we'll see what Dana has got in store.
One thing that we talked about afterwards was potentially doing a fight in Africa to raise money for different African countries like Somalia, Sudan, or among ones you mentioned. Dustin Poirier gives a lot of money to charitable causes.
Yeah.
That must be nice for this promotion to see the fighters getting so involved with philanthropy. Is that something that the UFC wants to help steer more fighters into that direction? Because I think it's a really positive look for the organization and for the fighters themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with that. I think when it comes to our participation, I mean, we are always around to provide tools and education and support for athletes in whatever area of their careers they would like some support in. I mean, it's kind of one of the founding principles of the Performance Institutes. But when it comes to, media training, social media help, working on one's personal brand, these are, tools and services that we're always available to provide. When it comes to the philanthropic side of it, it's not something, everyone's got kind of their own cause and their own purpose, and we think that's great, and we respect all of it. We'd love to continue to see more of it. It's nice when our athletes are using their platform to raise money for a good cause, especially when it comes down to some of the causes that both Khabib and Poirier were talking about. The Africa conversation is an interesting one because of now the rise to the top of Ngannou and Usman and obviously Adesanya and a variety of others. So the time I don't think has ever been as kind of ripe as it is right now. But there's a litany of challenges that we'd have try to put on an event in Africa, depending on lots of different countries, and I think the first look we would probably have is to South Africa because of, the importance of our broadcast relationship there with SuperSport. But the possibilities are definitely on the list right now.
Talking about fighters connecting with demographics and your YouTube viewership and everything. Weili Zhang, obviously big news, Chinese champion, the first UFC Chinese champion. Vancouver's got a huge Chinese population. Canada does as well. Obviously, the States. Is the intent to have her continue competing in China, or do you want to see her, fight some of the other markets where she'd have a big following?
It's a really good question, and I think it's something that's being kicked around right now. I haven't spoken to any other guys about the next steps for her, though. Winning so quickly, we'd love to have her back soon. I think there's a real argument to have her fight in China. I mean, this is the kind of strike while the iron's hot type of concept where, the numbers that she was putting up and the response that we got from not only the mixed martial arts community, but the community as a whole has been unlike anything we've ever seen before. to the extent that, we've got a real opportunity to take her back a few more times, and you you help her, you facilitate that rise, that growth to a Yao Ming type of status, which, this is new territory for us. And so we're trying to figure out that game plan. At the same time, nothing can give a fighter, more exposure than getting them on a big pay-per-view card that probably is in North America. So I'm not sure what Dana's plans are yet, but we've got a problem that you like to have on your hands when it comes to her next steps.
You mentioned these metrics from China for Zhang Weili and all the potential there. How much of that market is dependent on her success?
Well, I think this is just the start. I mean, what I think was largely not undocumented, but certainly didn't get the same attention as she got, was the fact that we had, 2 athletes that had come from the Shanghai Performance Institute that won on the card, right? And the Shanghai Performance Institute's only been open since June. And when we sat down a year ago, I think we were talking about this, we sort of laid out, okay, what's the 5-year plan for the China business? And we wanted to have a Chinese athlete by year 3 or something like that. And it really happened within kind of 9 months. But now we've got the tools, we've got, the framework to help foster and cultivate the talent in China and indeed North Asia. I mean, now all of a sudden you've got this facility that everyone through China and Japan and Korea and a few other places can come and train at. I think this is just going to pave the way to a variety of other contenders and people who are getting involved successfully in the UFC, and that we're thrilled about because, this is we're in it for the long run there. I mean, I think that we've proven, we've made the investment in the country. We've got great broadcast relationships, both on the public side with the state broadcasters as well as PPTV and a few others, and I think this is just the kind of first chapter of a long, long game.
Are there any challenges to continuing that market that everyone may not know about, sort of from the outside?
Not particularly. I mean, I think, it took a few events to kind of get our feet wet and understand how we work with local officials and how our operations work, but nothing that's insurmountable. I mean, I think we're on a pretty good pace right now. So we'll probably end up being in China a couple times next year. And then, listen, we've got this amazing facility, and you see what we're doing with the Apex in Las Vegas and hosting Contender Series. We're batting around a number of different concepts for the Performance Institute in Shanghai, hosting local events, producing localized content. I mean, this is just the start.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Thanks very much. See you.